Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me here today as we go on a tour and also an interview with the CEO of IXAfrica, Snehar Shah. As you can see, we're on location capturing what is today the newest and the most advanced data center in this part of the world. IXAfrica is a $50 million investment that basically is bringing the best and world-class data center capabilities to Kenya and the East African region. Karibuni sana. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to yet another edition of the Pure Digital Passion Podcast with me, Moses Kemibaro. We're here at an amazingly high-tech data center called IXAfrica, and this is the latest in a series of data centers that have been launching and opening up in this capital city of Nairobi. And what's interesting is that running this particular data center and business is Snehar Shah, somebody I've known for a good number of years and a good friend, and he's going to tell us all the nuances, the ins and outs, and what makes this Kenya's and East Africa's finest and most advanced data center in the region. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Moses, and it's good to see you in a business setting. I know we meet each other while running,
yes,
and follow each other, taking pictures of sunsets,
yeah, exactly.
on social media. So
Snehar, you recently transitioned to joining IXAfrica. I think just before this you were at Moringa. I've known you, I think, for the better part of 10 years in various roles. But maybe you can just give us a little historical context of the journey to get to here in terms of joining IXAfrica, the inspiration, but also maybe a little bit of a backstory around who you are and what it is that you've been doing.
Sure. I would say like serendipity or luck has played a big part for bringing me to where I am.
Yes.
But rolling all the way back. I come from the Rift Valley in Eldoret.
LD?
That's where I schooled and I was brought up.
Okay.
So that's where I got the running in my blood.
Yes, fantastic.
But when I was a teenager, my family moved to the UK.
Oh, okay.
So I did my schooling and university there.
Okay.
I qualified as an electrical engineer from Imperial College in London.
Wow.
But I always had business in my blood, so as soon as I qualified, I went on to PwC.
You did a stint in the consulting
yeah, to become a chartered accountant.
Okay, wow.
And audit. And in those days, my biggest client was a company called Orange, which is actually a startup in the UK.
Back in the day, huh?
They're the guys who invented prepaid, calling, and all the charging mechanism around there. So I did some work in business planning, strategy with Orange in UK and Europe.
Okay.
And then 15 years ago in 2008, when they bought Telecom Kenya, I got posted here to be head of the finance division, turning around the parastatal, launching a new GSM network. And then I got into innovation by launching Orange Money in partnership with Equity Bank.
Fantastic.
And 13 years ago in those days, this was before fintech became a big thing.
Correct.
We had built banking functionality onto mobile phones.
Correct.
So it was quite ahead of its time, and that's what now become the MVNO, which we know as Equitel.
Correct.
So that's sort of inspired me to work a lot more in tech and innovation. And after having a career of about 15 years in corporate, I decided to quit my corporate life. And IXAfrica today is my fourth startup that I'm working on.
Really? Wow.
The first one being quite similar, but in telecoms infrastructure, where I was CFO for a company called Eaton Towers.
Okay, I remember, I know them, yes.
We bought portfolios of towers from the mobile operators like Airtel, Orange, Warid, Vodafone, etc. On sale and leaseback deals.
Okay.
And then we sold that company to American Tower back in 2018. That's when I exited.
Okay.
And then I had a stint in renewable energy.
Okay.
So I was running a Paygo solar company called Azuri.
I remember that as well.
We scaled up to having powered about 300,000 homes in 5 countries in Africa. And just during COVID, we merged the operations with another Canadian competitor called Solar Panda.
Okay.
And that's when the founder of Moringa had moved on, Audrey Cheng. She'd moved back to the US to actually become the business development head of Discord. and they were looking for somebody to really scale that tech institution.
Correct.
So apart from my sort of tech and financial skills, what I've learned in the past decade is how to scale companies, and that's why I was brought on to IXAfrica as well. So Moringa had a great stint working in tech education side, providing an alternative education model, using sort of boot camps, training software developers, data scientists, and then placing them into jobs, doing things like cloud training. Moringa also runs the Safaricom Digital Academy.
Oh, fantastic.
That has been so far one of the most satisfying,
gratifying
career stints
yes.
in my career. And I'm still very much involved as a shareholder and also on the board. I actually chair our tech advisory board, where we have a good mix of tech veterans to guide the strategy for Moringa.
Correct.
But I joined IXAfrica. I was brought in by Helios, who had also worked with previously in my telecoms career.
Okay.
And they were looking for somebody to come and scale the data center business in Kenya. So here I am.
Great.
Yeah.
So I have a question, and I think this is more of a macro question, because my sense is that, especially after I attended IXAfrica, the first one a few months ago, you and I met there. I think that's when you just transitioned into IXAfrica. But what was very clear to me is that there seems to be this mushrooming of data centers across the region. And in particular, we know that IXAfrica is one of the most ambitious and one of the most capable ones in the market. Why now? Why here? What's driving this transformation on the ground?
So Moses, it's all about timing, right? Again, just to sort of look at my career, is the decade of the 2000s was all about mobile telephony.
Correct.
And for Africa, how mobile telephony leapfrogged the need for landlines.
Correct,
right?
correct.
The last decade has been all about mobile money, fintech, and also sort of telco infrastructure, where you saw all the MNOs outsourcing, for example, the towers doing big deals. And I was fortunate enough to have seen that whole transition. And when it comes to data centers, as you must be aware, in the US, Europe, Asia, there's been a massive explosion of growth of data centers as the whole world is digitalizing. Of course, also helped by what we saw during COVID.
Correct.
All the remote working, everything moving to the cloud.
Correct.
So we've been sort of beneficiaries of that. I think Kenya, we're at the tip of the iceberg. There have been other smaller data centers who have been sort of homegrown. They've grown quite gradually.
Correct.
But we're coming in with a big step change. And our vision, our strategy is to bring the hyperscalers here. So the AWSs, the Googles, the Microsofts, to bring the cloud locally in Kenya and in this region. And we have the conviction it's not about if, but when they come. So that's what really we are gearing up for.
Maybe you can just give us a quick definition of what a hyperscaler is, because that's a term that I actually learned during the ITW event.
Right. Yeah, and it's also a new term that's come into my dictionary. But hyperscaler is basically where the companies, the big techs, so like AWS, Microsoft with Azure, Google with Google Cloud, we've got Oracle, etc. That they're the guys who are basically running the cloud infrastructure. And cloud is not up there in the sky; it's somewhere on the ground.
Yes.
And they build big capacity, big data centers. Where they and the way they measure the hyperscaler business is in terms of the number of megawatts of power that these data centers are consuming.
Correct.
And data centers are actually the largest consumers of power and growing. So if you look at today globally, I understand data centers are consuming something like 5% of the total power consumption in the world. And they're projected in the next 10 years to be consuming as much as between 20 to 30%. So you can imagine the growth that's going to be there. That's really what hyperscalers are. And today, when banks or enterprises, or even us personally, when we put our data on the cloud, it's currently probably sitting somewhere in the Western world or somewhere in Asia. and because of data sovereignty requirements, because of need for lower latency, as applications get more sophisticated, and not to mention, you know, the advent of AI and how that is also growing exponentially, there's absolutely a need to now have the cloud infrastructure based here locally, so that if you're a bank or enterprise or even a personal customer,
correct,
you can be then putting your computer or your storage with these hyperscalers based here locally.
Okay, so maybe let's move away from hyperscalers and just look at the local market scenario, because I think, as you know, I worked in the ISP space for many years.
Right.
You know, people like Africa Online and Formnet, companies that no longer exist. But my interpretation, especially when I visited one other data center, was the modern data center is something completely different in Kenya or East Africa to what we knew 10 or 15 years ago. Can you tell us some of the nuances and the unique aspects of your particular data center? Because if I'm not wrong, and what I saw on your website, you know, you've deployed an investment of, I think, about $50 million. And more importantly, what does that mean in terms of what makes this unique and special amongst all the data centers that are coming into the market, and those, of course, that have been in the market already?
Sure. And I think, you know, we were joking, like in the old days, you know, you used to share a fan with the servers,
in a data
right?
center, correct. With an air conditioner, regular conventional
not even
air
data center,
conditioner.
but what was called like server rooms, right?
Correct.
But that trend is changing and changing very fast, you know, especially post-COVID. So, you know, banks, other enterprises, you know, they used to run like on-premises, their own server rooms.
Yes.
And, you know, they had the headache of managing the powering of those servers.
Correct.
The uptime, the cooling, which is also, you know, very important
Correct.
to make sure that the servers are operating at sort of most efficient conditions. And you know, there's been a trend of moving some of those servers onto the cloud. And you know, on the cloud, there are of course advantages, right? Because then you're with one of the hyperscalers, you get all the other layers of service, including security, etc. But you know, there's downsides as well. I mean, one is you don't know where your data is, and again, with the data protection regulations, there's a need to have that data sovereignty, especially when it comes to your sensitive data. And then, you know, latency as well, right?
The speed at which,
speed. And then thirdly, which is something that's coming out quite recently, obviously with our Forex decline. And, you know, when you're on some of these cloud platforms, you're being charged on a per user basis.
Correct.
In US dollars. So that's beginning to hurt a lot of CIOs and CFOs. So we're actually seeing now reverse migration, you know, from the cloud to now, you know, working with local established data centers like ours. So yeah, we're seeing that trend happening, and you know, we've built the infrastructure, and we're in active negotiations to bring these you know, wholesale clients or hyperscalers in. But you know, those have long lead times. But because you know, we've been live since 6th of October.
Yes.
So we're here ready to also host you know, the local enterprises who can really benefit from a very high level of SLAs. We are a very future-proof for data center, and you know, we can give attractive commercials to help our local clients to also come on board.
Let's talk about sustainability. All right, this is something that I think the common phrase now is ESG, environment, sustainability, and governance. We know that going green has become a major topic of concern. You know, the climate conference the other day was in Egypt.
Yes.
And I know that this is top of mind for the CFO, for the CIO, for the CEO, and all the different facets of leadership in organizations to ensure that their partners and those who they're using their infrastructure or propositions align to those standards. So when we think about IXAfrica and what it is that you have here, what can you tell us about the initiatives or the steps you've taken to ensure that you're a sustainable business? So
sustainability is actually, you know, very key for us. You know, let's start with our investor Helios, who is a very ESG compliant private equity investor. They're the largest private equity fund in Africa.
Wow.
And you know, they're putting the equity, but we're also working closely with them to also attract debt funding from DFIs, etc., who are also very you know, ESG conscious. And actually Helios have a whole ESG department that we work with to make sure that we have the right ESG reporting that's done, right from our sort of measuring our carbon emissions,
Okay.
and looking at how we are mitigating them, to other ESG aspects in terms of being an equal opportunity employer, to have the right work conditions and training for our employees and our contractors. So that's something that we're very compliant. And also we have a whole motto of keeping it local. This office that you see, as you can see, we're in a very sort of traditional African feel.
Yes.
We've sourced locally manufactured material. We've kept it as natural as possible. And then we also use local fundis, local contractors to do all the installation. So that's something that we're also very, very conscious about. You'll also see when you do the tour some of our switchgear, which is from a leading local manufacturer, who's actually right next door.
Actually manufactured
here. So very high-end, engineered switchgear that we're using. So again, we're all about keeping it local. And then the other aspect is on the sort of the power, right? And I think this is something that's actually come to the foray quite recently. Before, Kenya was known obviously for our wildlife, our natural resources,
correct,
for our smart talent and fintech, mobile money. That's why people came to Kenya. And in fact, I was honored to be on the visit with the president to the Silicon Valley a couple of months ago.
I remember that, yes.
And that was just after the Africa Climate Summit.
Correct.
And what many people were really shocked and surprised to hear is that 92% of our power generation is all from renewable energy, from geothermal, hydro and wind. Kenya is the 8th largest producer of geothermal energy globally after Scandinavia and Iceland. So I think we're really well positioned geographically. And in fact, we have a project with Jack Gare, who works for the global CTO office.
Correct, I know Jack.
Google.
Yeah.
And we're trying to see how we can position Kenya to be a destination to host not only data centers for our local needs, but also for global needs, because we have clean power, and it's also quite. I mean, we can all shout about the cost of power, but actually, if you look at globally, it's actually quite attractive. If somebody is running a data center in Frankfurt, which is another big destination for data centers,
correct,
90% of the power generation is using fossil fuel.
Wow.
They're charging something like 55 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas in Kenya you can get as low as 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So I think we can be also globally competitive.
That is interesting. So what you're telling me is that all factors held constant, Kenya could become a data center destination for global organizations that decide that not only do they want to work with a sustainable partner, but the economy is actually more practical here versus there. Absolutely. Is that what you're telling me?
Absolutely. I mean, and you can look at all the different factors. So there's power.
Yes.
There's availability of smart, skilled talent.
Exactly.
At a low cost, and that's something like, again, with my Moringa school hat.
Correct. Correct.
We're the ones who are training the future cloud practitioners,
the data scientists,
etc.
Yeah.
And then also we have all the submarine cables landing here.
Correct.
Right. We already have I think more than half a dozen.
Yes.
We got the big ones coming in. So we got IXAfrica, which is coming from Meta, Facebook.
Correct.
And we've got the IXAfrica, which is Google is part of it. And these are going to multiply the available bandwidth and capacity by multiple times.
Wow.
So even the cost of bandwidth will go down, which will enable doing cost of business, putting things on cloud, the connectivity that will all become much cheaper. So I think we have all the right factors here. Where we need help is to make sure that government also plays ball.
Yes.
That we're giving the right incentives for foreign investors, foreign companies to come and invest and work in this part of the world.
Okay, I have a couple of more questions for you, Snehar, before we go on the tour. One is, there's this skepticism, and I'm talking also as an entrepreneur, where in my business, for instance, for over 2 decades, we've hosted all our websites and infrastructure in North America for fear of quality of service here locally. Number 2 is this question around what I tend to think of the IT manager's role locally, or the CIO manager's role, whereas there's a tendency to try and keep things on premise and not have it sitting out in a place like yours. And of course, I've seen some of the infrastructure already, and it's all world class. So to those two questions, what would you say? Both the tendency to try and keep things in-house, and then the second thing is this idea that many of your potential customers have a confidence issue around, can this actually be done in Kenya? Mm-hmm. How would we kind of change that perspective?
Sure. I mean, let's start with the quality of service, right?
Yeah.
What you've seen or you'll see here is actually world class, right? We will build this to a spec, which again, what hyperscalers are used to, whether they're in Virginia or in Dublin or in Frankfurt.
Correct.
So that's the kind of quality of data center that we've built. We're getting all the right certifications in terms of physical security, PCI DSS, IT security with ISO 27001.
Yes.
We have what we call 5.9 level of sort of uptime, so 99.9999%. And we've got all the redundancy here. That's the way we've designed this to. We're pulling in two 11,000 kilowatt power lines from different sources into the data center, and then we have what we call N+1 redundancy.
Correct.
Where we have actually distributed our power into actually 8 times. So it's called 846. Redundancy. So at any one point in time, we have 2 units, whether they are transformers or batteries or UPSs, which are sort of redundant. So if ever one goes down, then the others can switch over. And so that first of all gives all the confidence to clients who are running very sort of sensitive, critical applications here. One of the largest providers of mobile money, who I might not name, but their CTO has been to our space and was amazed. And actually, so we are kitted and set up to actually host that kind of critical infrastructure. When it comes to this philosophy or mentality of CIOs keeping it all in, I think that's changed or changing very fast. So number one is when people are running their own infrastructure, they didn't have DR, so disaster recovery.
Correct.
So the first trend that you've seen is a client might keep still their on-prem, but then use data centers like ours to do their disaster recovery.
Correct.
In fact, now there's this concept of actually not having primary and secondary sites, but actually mirrored sites and having load balancing, and that's also much more reliable and efficient as well. So that's where again data centers like ours come in. But I think there is a lot of education to be done.
Correct.
To all the CIOs that we have a very viable alternative here, because when you add the cost of space, the cost of equipment, the cost of power, cooling, manpower, and then you do that business case, then we can give straight savings to the CFOs and CIOs of these companies, and of course the peace of mind and the reliability that we can offer.
Let's talk about future proofing, and I'm talking specifically about the inevitable conversation, which is AI. All right. Now you're a brand new data center. You've come onto the market, but now the thing that's coming in at scale is the AI models, the GPUs, people like NVIDIA. We're already seeing and hearing cases of things happening in South Africa and so forth. Are you equipped for that new paradigm that is basically seemingly the next big thing? Yeah,
and I would comfortably say that we are the future-proof AI-ready data center campus here. We have a 5-acre site where we're building 22.5 megawatts.
This is the Tigoni location.
No, this one.
This one here.
Road,
okay.
22.5 megawatts, of which the first phase, which is 4.5 megawatts, that is live. And what you've seen is that 4.5 megawatts is split into 2 halls, one of 1.5 megawatts, another one of 3 megawatts, and already this our first phase makes us the largest data center in the region, not only in terms of size, but also in terms of ability to host the GPUs. So if you look at an average rack size, they would consume power anything between 3 to 10 kilowatts per rack. The NVIDIA chips and the GPUs that they use, they can go 50 kilowatts and above. So this data center here is ready to host those kind of NVIDIA GPUs and those kind of servers. So we're absolutely future ready. And again, for AI, as the LLM processing power is required, that will also need to be localized, and we are ready for that.
Okay. Two last questions. One is, what would you give as your parting shot to potential customers or people who should use your facility here on the ground? And then at the same time, what do you think the situation looks like in terms of, broadly speaking, the next 2 to 5 years when it comes to data centers in this region?
Sure. So my parting shot to potential clients is that this project has been in the works for at least the last 5 years.
Okay.
We were fortunate to get a strong investor like Helios in end of last year, and now we're ready. We're live with our first 4.5 megawatts. We have all the fiber interconnectivity here, so we're totally carrier neutral data center. We have a high level of SLAs, and also we're the first people to bring in the London Internet Exchange links into our space.
Okay.
So any client coming in, they will get access to that links network as well. And we've got some incentives that we can also give our clients that they'll benefit from coming in here.
Correct.
In terms of what the next 2 to 5 years looks, we are very optimistic about the rate of growth here, and that's why we're already in an exclusive option to acquire 11 acres of land in Limuru, which is about 30 kilometers from here. It is already 3 to 4 degrees cooler than Nairobi. It's got all the right fiber connectivity, but more importantly, in a place like Tilisi, which is the new industrial park, they've got the right power, clean power, and reliable power available there. So we've already designed that site, and in fact on 11 acres we can fit almost double, in fact more than double what we have here at about 53 megawatts, and that will be also fully AI ready. So those are some of our immediate plans in Kenya, but also with Helios we have a Pan-Africa strategy, and we've also acquired a small data center in Morocco.
Okay.
It's called MDC, Morocco Data Center, which we also use to then do more greenfield sites in a place in North Africa.
So really looking at a Pan-African footprint over time.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Snehar. It's been a pleasure. Right now I'm super excited to go in and see what this infrastructure looks like, what this data center looks like, with the kind of investment that you put in. And I'm hoping that for our audience we'll be able to give them a taste of why they need to look at IXAfrica as one of the places that they can host their solutions.
Thank you, Moses, and
Asante
we welcome
sana.
you to walk into the future with IXAfrica.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.